I thought coming home from my business trip would be the usual routine: drop my bags, check the mail, maybe order some takeout. What I didn't expect was to walk into my apartment and find it completely transformed into what looked like a Pinterest board threw up everywhere. Crystal chandeliers hung where my simple ceiling fan used to be, the walls were painted in colors I'd never seen before, and my comfortable leather couch had been replaced with something that belonged in a Victorian mansion. But here's the thing my sister Rebecca didn't know when she decided to play interior designer with my life. I don't just live in this building, I own it. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The flight from Denver back to Chicago felt longer than usual. 3 weeks of back-to-back client meetings had drained me more than I cared to admit. All I wanted was to collapse on my worn leather sectional with a glass of wine and catch up on the shows I'd missed. My apartment in Lincoln Park wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Comfortable, lived in, and exactly how I liked it. I bought the entire 4-story brownstone 2 years ago as an investment property. The previous owner, an elderly man named Mr. Kowalski, had been desperate to sell after his wife passed away. The building needed work, but the location was perfect and the price was right. I kept the top floor as my personal apartment and rented out the other 3 units. It generated enough income to cover the mortgage and then some, which gave me the freedom to be selective with my consulting work. The key turned smoothly in the lobby door, and I lugged my suitcase up the narrow staircase to the 4th floor. The familiar creak of the 3rd step from the top made me smile. Some things never change. I fumbled with my keys at apartment 4A, already mentally planning my evening of absolute nothing. The door swung open, and I froze. This wasn't my apartment. This couldn't be my apartment. Where my simple beige walls once stood, there were now deep burgundy accent walls with gold trim that looked like it belonged in Versailles. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow prisms across surfaces I didn't recognize. My comfortable sectional had vanished, replaced by an ornate velvet sofa in emerald green with more throw pillows than a furniture showroom. I stepped inside, my suitcase forgotten in the doorway. The hardwood floors I'd spent months refinishing were now covered with an enormous Persian rug that probably cost more than my car. My simple dining table had been swapped for a mahogany monstrosity with matching chairs that looked like thrones. "What the hell?" I whispered, setting my purse down on what used to be my kitchen counter but was now granite with gold veining. The kitchen had been completely transformed. My white cabinets were now a deep navy blue with brass hardware that gleamed under new pendant lights shaped like teardrops. The refrigerator was the same, but it was now surrounded by so much decoration I almost didn't recognize it. Fresh flowers, expensive ones, sat in a crystal vase on the counter next to a wine rack I'd never seen before. I walked toward my bedroom, hoping against hope that at least one room had been spared from this makeover nightmare. The hallway walls were now covered in wallpaper with a pattern that made my eyes hurt, some kind of geometric design in silver and black. Family photos I'd never seen before lined the walls in ornate frames. My bedroom door was partially open, and I pushed it wider with growing dread. The room looked like it belonged to someone else entirely. My queen bed had been replaced with a king-sized 4-poster monstrosity draped in flowing curtains. The walls were painted a soft pink that made me feel nauseous, and there were decorative mirrors everywhere, on the walls, propped on new furniture, even hanging from the ceiling. My walk-in closet had been reorganized completely. Clothes I didn't recognize hung next to my own things, and everything was arranged by color and style in a way that would have impressed a department store visual merchandiser. New shelving had been installed, holding purses and shoes I'd never bought. I backed out of the bedroom and stood in the living room trying to process what had happened. Then I saw it. A small stack of receipts sitting on the new coffee table, held down by a decorative paperweight shaped like a pineapple. The receipts told the story I didn't want to hear. Thousands of dollars spent at furniture stores, home improvement centers, and boutique decorating shops, all charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. The dates showed the purchases had been made over the past 2 weeks, while I was in Denver. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note on expensive-looking stationery. Delilah, surprise! I know you've been working so hard lately, and your place was looking so tired and dated. I thought you deserved something beautiful to come home to. Don't worry about the cost. I used the credit card from your desk drawer and figured we could work out the details later. I hope you love your new space as much as I loved creating it. XXO, Rebecca. Rebecca? My sister Rebecca had done this. I sank onto the velvet sofa, which was somehow both too soft and too firm at the same time. The credit card from my desk drawer, that was my business emergency card, the one I kept for unexpected client expenses. Rebecca had helped herself to it and spent what looked like $15,000 redecorating my apartment without asking. My phone buzzed with a text message. Rebecca, as if she had perfect timing. Hope you're home and love the surprise. Can't wait to hear what you think. Delilah, House and Home. I stared at the message, my hands actually shaking with anger. Rebecca lived in our hometown of Rockford, about 90 minutes away. She was married to a guy named Travis who worked in construction, and they had 2 young kids. Money was always tight for them, which I knew because Rebecca frequently called asking for loans she never quite managed to pay back. But this wasn't a loan. This was theft and destruction rolled into one beautifully decorated package. I called her immediately, pacing across the Persian rug that covered my carefully refinished floors. Delilah, did you see your apartment? Isn't it gorgeous? Rebecca's voice was bright and excited, completely oblivious to the fury building in my chest. Rebecca, what did you do? I redecorated. You were gone for so long, and I had some free time after the kids started school, so I thought... You thought you'd spend $15,000 of my money without asking me? There was a pause. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad. But Delilah, you should see how amazing it looks. It's like something from a magazine. You're going to love living there now. I loved living here before. Rebecca, you can't just walk into someone's home and change everything. But it was so boring before, all beige and brown and blah. Now it has personality, style. I have a real eye for this kind of thing, you know. Travis always says I should have been an interior designer. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, then 20. How did you even get in here? You gave me a key, remember, for emergencies? This wasn't an emergency. Well, no, but I thought... Look, I know you're probably just shocked by the change. Change is hard, but give it a few days and you'll see how much better this is. I looked around at the transformation of my peaceful, comfortable space into what looked like a luxury hotel lobby with a baby with a Victorian mansion. Everything was beautiful in the way that magazine spreads are beautiful. Perfectly arranged, impossibly coordinated, and completely soulless. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the money, though that's a huge problem. This is about respect. This is about boundaries. You don't get to make decisions about my home. I was trying to do something nice for you. God, Delilah, you're so ungrateful sometimes. Do you know how much work this was? I spent 2 entire weeks making your place beautiful. The word ungrateful hit me like a slap. I sat down hard on the velvet sofa, staring at the crystal chandelier that threw light patterns across my ceiling. I'm ungrateful? Yes, I put my heart into this project. I researched designers and color schemes and spent hours in stores finding the perfect pieces. And instead of thanking me, you're yelling at me about money. I realized in that moment that Rebecca genuinely believed she'd done me a favor. In her mind, she'd swooped in and saved me from my boring, comfortable life by imposing her vision of what my home should look like. The fact that I hadn't asked for this, didn't want this, and couldn't afford this was irrelevant to her. But what Rebecca didn't know, what she had no idea about, was that she hadn't just redecorated my apartment. She'd redecorated the apartment of her landlord. After hanging up on Rebecca, I stood in the middle of what used to be my living room and tried to make sense of the situation. The immediate shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, calculating anger that surprised me with its intensity. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Marcus Thompson, my property manager. Marcus handled the day-to-day operations of my other rental properties around the city, but I'd always managed this building myself since I lived here. Still, he'd helped me with the initial purchase and knew the ins and outs of landlord-tenant law better than anyone. "Delilah, how is Denver?" Marcus's voice was warm and familiar. "Complicated. Marcus, I need to ask you something hypothetical. If someone who wasn't on a lease damaged a rental property and racked up thousands in unauthorized charges, what would be my legal options?" A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. That's oddly specific for a hypothetical. Are we talking about one of your tenants? Not exactly. Someone related to a tenant. Ah. Marcus's tone shifted to professional. Well, technically, if someone caused damage or incurred expenses without authorization, the tenant would be liable, since they're responsible for anyone they allow access. But if we're talking about family members, that gets messier. What kind of damage are we discussing? I looked around at the crystal chandelier, the velvet furniture, and the Persian rug. Let's say extensive, unauthorized renovations. Very expensive ones. Jesus, Delilah. Unauthorized renovations could affect the building's insurance, violate zoning codes, impact other tenants. This isn't just about money. Who did this? My sister. To my apartment while I was out of town. The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Your sister renovated your apartment without permission? The apartment you live in the building you own? That's right. Does she know you own the building? No. She thinks I'm just another tenant. Marcus whistled low. Oh, this is good. This is really good. From a legal standpoint, you have her dead to rights on multiple fronts. But Delilah, this is your sister. Are you sure you want to go nuclear? I wasn't sure of anything anymore. The apartment that had been my sanctuary now felt like a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. Every surface I looked at reminded me that Rebecca had waltzed in here and decided my life needed improving without bothering to ask what I thought about it. After hanging up with Marcus, I decided I needed to see the full scope of the damage. I'd been so shocked by the main rooms that I hadn't thoroughly examined everything. The bathroom had been completely retiled in some kind of expensive-looking marble with gold fixtures that belonged in a five-star hotel. My simple shower curtain had been replaced with a glass door system that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it was when I opened the linen closet that I found something that made my blood boil all over again. Stacked neatly on the shelves were receipts and invoices that Rebecca had apparently saved as proof of her handiwork. I grabbed the stack and spread them out on the new granite kitchen counter. The numbers were worse than I'd initially thought. The total wasn't $15,000, it was closer to $22,000. There were charges from stores I'd never heard of, custom work orders for things like the chandelier installation and the bathroom retiling, and even a bill from a company called Luxury Living Consultants for something called a complete lifestyle transformation package. One receipt made me pause. It was from Hendrick's Hardware, a local place I knew well because I'd bought supplies there when I was renovating the building. The receipt was for new locks, specifically a high-end smart lock system for the front entrance and individual unit doors. Rebecca had changed the locks on my building? My building? I called Hendrick's immediately, hoping they'd still be open despite the late hour. Hendrick's Hardware, this is Mike. Hi, Mike. This is Delilah Long. I own the brownstone on Maple Street, and I think someone may have purchased locks for my building without my authorization. Oh yeah, Delilah. Your sister came in a couple weeks ago. Nice lady. She said you'd asked her to upgrade the security system while you were out of town. We installed some really nice smart locks, top-of-the-line stuff. My grip tightened on the phone. She said I asked her to do this? That's right. She had your credit card and seemed to know all about the building layout. Said you wanted to surprise the tenants with better security. We even programmed the master codes to her specifications. Rebecca hadn't just redecorated my apartment, she'd taken control of access to my entire building and told local businesses that she was acting on my behalf. This was moving beyond sibling overreach into something that felt dangerously close to identity theft. I hung up with Mike and immediately tried the new smart lock on my apartment door. It worked, with a different code than I'd set, which meant Rebecca had programmed it herself. I tried to access the master controls and found that she'd somehow locked me out of my own system. The front door of the building now required a code I didn't know to get in from the outside. My tenants, who were paying me rent, couldn't access their own building without codes that my sister had created. I called Marcus back. "She changed the locks on the entire building," I said without preamble. "What?" "Rebecca changed all the locks. The tenants can't get in, I can't reset the system because she programmed it and I don't have the master codes. Delilah, this isn't just property damage anymore. She's essentially taken control of your building. Your tenants are going to start calling soon if they can't get home from work." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a call from Jenny Rodriguez, who rented apartment 2B with her boyfriend Carlos.
Delilah, I'm so sorry to bother you, but the front door isn't working. The key doesn't fit anymore, and there's some kind of electronic keypad now. Carlos is stuck outside, and our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, is really confused. Mrs. Patterson was 83 years old and had lived in apartment 1A since before I bought the building. She was on a fixed income, and the affordable rent I charged her was one of the reasons I kept the building rather than selling it for a quick profit. "Jenny, I'm so sorry. There's been a mistake with the lock system. Can you give me about an hour to sort this out?" "Of course, but Delilah, what happened? The door looks completely different, and there are all these new security features." I promised Jenny I'd figure it out and hung up, then immediately called Hendricks back. "Mike, this is Delilah Long again. I need someone to come out tonight and reset the lock system on my building. My tenants can't get in." "Tonight? Delilah, it's almost 8 o'clock. Emergency service calls are expensive, and honestly, if your sister programmed the system, she should have the reset codes." "My sister didn't have authorization to change those locks. I need my building accessible to my tenants." Mike's tone shifted. Oh, I see. This is awkward. If she wasn't authorized to make those changes, look, let me call my guy who did the installation. Maybe we can work something out. While I waited for Mike to call back, I walked downstairs to check on my tenants. Mrs. Patterson was standing in the lobby in her housecoat, looking bewildered by the new security system. Through the glass front door, I could see Carlos pacing on the sidewalk, talking animatedly on his phone. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry about this confusion. We're going to have the door fixed within the hour." "Delilah, dear, what happened? I went to visit my daughter this afternoon, and when I came back, nothing worked. The nice young woman who was here last week said these new locks would make us all safer, but I can't remember numbers very well anymore." "Someone was here last week?" "Oh yes, your sister, I think she said. She was doing such lovely work in your apartment upstairs. She mentioned that you'd asked her to improve security for all of us tenants. She seemed to know quite a lot about the building." My sister had been presenting herself as my authorized representative to my tenants. She'd been in and out of my building for over a week, making changes and spending money, while telling everyone, from my tenants to local businesses, that she was acting on my behalf. Mike called back with good news. His installer could come out immediately and reset the system, but it would cost me $400 for the emergency service call. I authorized the expense, adding it to the growing list of costs that Rebecca's surprise was generating. While I waited for the locksmith, I sat in the lobby with Mrs. Patterson and tried to process everything that had happened. My sister had essentially taken over my life for 3 weeks. She'd accessed my apartment, spent my money, made decisions about my property, and presented herself as my agent to dozens of people. And the scariest part was that she seemed to genuinely believe she'd done me a favor. The locksmith arrived 40 minutes later and had the system reset within an hour. I walked through the building with him, explaining which tenants needed access codes and making sure everyone could get into their apartments. Carlos and Jenny were apologetic about the inconvenience, and Mrs. Patterson was just grateful to be back in her own home. But as I climbed the stairs back to apartment 4A, I realized that the lock situation was just the beginning. Tomorrow, I'd have to figure out how to address the $22,000 in charges, the unauthorized renovations, and the fact that my sister had systematically violated every boundary I'd ever set. What Rebecca didn't know was that she'd just committed fraud against the owner of the building she thought she was helping to improve. And tomorrow morning, she was going to learn exactly what that meant. I barely slept that night on the velvet monstrosity that had replaced my comfortable bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about Rebecca walking through my building like she owned it, chatting with my tenants, spending my money, and making decisions that affected people's lives. By 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and started making phone calls. First was my credit card company. The customer service representative, a woman named Patricia, listened patiently as I explained that someone had used my business card without authorization. I see charges totaling approximately $22,000 over a 2-week period. That's definitely an unusual activity. The good news is that we can dispute these charges and issue you a new card immediately. The bad news is that this process can take 60 to 90 days to resolve completely. What about the merchants who were paid? Some of them provided services to my property based on what they believed was my authorization. That's where it gets complicated, Miss Long. If the merchants can prove they provided goods and services in good faith, you might still be liable for those charges, even if we determine the card was used fraudulently. After hanging up with the credit card company, I called my insurance agent to find out if the unauthorized renovations would affect my landlord policy. That conversation was even more frustrating. Delilah, renovations done without permits could void certain aspects of your coverage, my agent explained. I need to send someone out to assess whether the work was done to code. If the electrical work for that chandelier wasn't permitted, for example, we might not cover damages if it causes a fire. The chandelier. I looked up at the massive crystal fixture hanging over what used to be my simple dining area and realized I hadn't even thought about whether Rebecca had hired licensed electricians. For all I knew, she'd found someone on Craigslist to install a heavy lighting fixture in a century-old building. My phone rang before I could spiral further into worst-case scenarios. It was Jenny from 2B. Delilah, I'm sorry to bother you again, but there's a delivery truck outside trying to bring in more furniture. The driver says it's for apartment 4A, but he's asking about access codes and delivery instructions that I don't understand. I looked out my window and saw a truck from Premier Home Furnishing. A delivery man was standing on the sidewalk with a clipboard, looking frustrated. Tell him there's been a mistake and to take everything back. But when I went downstairs to talk to the delivery driver myself, he showed me an order form with Rebecca's signature and my credit card information. She'd apparently ordered even more furniture that was scheduled to arrive today. "Ma'am, this is a custom piece," the driver explained, pointing to something covered in blankets in the back of his truck. "It was made specifically for this address. We can't just take it back. There's nowhere for it to go." I looked at the order form more carefully. Rebecca had ordered a custom dining room hutch made from reclaimed wood to match the dining table she'd already installed. The piece had cost $3,000 and took 2 weeks to build. "I didn't order this," I told the driver. "The lady who signed for it said she was redecorating for the homeowner. She had all the right information, the credit card, the address, the apartment number. She even knew about the building layout and where you wanted it placed." There was that word again, homeowner. Rebecca had been telling people she was acting on behalf of the homeowner, which was technically true, except she had no idea the homeowner was her own sister. I ended up accepting the delivery because refusing it would have cost me additional fees, but I had them leave the hutch in the building's basement storage area until I could figure out what to do with it. As the delivery men carried the piece downstairs, Mrs. Patterson emerged from her apartment. "Oh my, more beautiful furniture! Your sister has such wonderful taste, Delilah. She spent quite a bit of time asking me about the building's history when she was here. Such a sweet girl." "What did she ask about?" "Oh, just general things. How long I'd lived here, what the previous owner was like, whether I was happy with the current management. She seemed very interested in making sure all the tenants were comfortable." A chill ran down my spine. Rebecca had been gathering information about my tenants and my property management. But why?
I was about to ask Mrs. Patterson for more details when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a Rockford area code. Delilah, this is Travis, Rebecca's husband. We need to talk. Travis sounded tired and stressed, which was unusual. In the 5 years he'd been married to my sister, I'd maybe spoken to him a dozen times. He was a quiet guy who seemed content to let Rebecca handle the family communications. What's going on, Travis? Rebecca told me what she did to your apartment. She's been talking about it nonstop for weeks, showing me pictures, planning more changes. I thought she was just helping you redecorate, but when I saw the credit card bills last night— You saw the bills?
Delilah, she spent more than I made in 6 months. She used multiple credit cards, some I'd never seen before. When I asked her where they came from, she said you'd given her permission to handle your finances while you were traveling. This was new information. Rebecca had told her own husband that I'd given her financial authorization. She wasn't just spending my money impulsively. She'd constructed an entire narrative to justify her actions. Travis, I never gave her permission to spend anything. I didn't even know she was in my apartment until I came home last night. That's what I was afraid of. Travis sighed heavily. Delilah, there's something else you need to know. Rebecca's been talking about this project like it's just the beginning. She's got plans to redecorate other apartments in your building. What other apartments? She mentioned something about helping the elderly lady downstairs and maybe updating the common areas. She's been researching property management companies and talking about starting her own interior design business. She thinks this project is going to be her portfolio piece. I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole. Rebecca hadn't just redecorated my apartment. She'd decided to launch a career as an interior designer, using my building as her showcase. She was planning to expand her unauthorized renovations to other units and common areas. Travis, she can't redecorate other people's apartments. Those are rental units with tenants who have rights. I tried to tell her that, but she says you've been too busy with work to properly maintain the building and that she's just helping you become a better landlord. She's convinced herself that she's doing everyone a favor. After hanging up with Travis, I sat in my basement storage area next to the $3,000 hutch I didn't want and tried to process what I'd learned. Rebecca wasn't just an overeager sister who'd overstepped boundaries. She was someone who'd created an entire alternate reality where she was my authorized business partner and interior design consultant. The scariest part was how thorough she'd been. She'd researched property management, talked to my tenants, gathered information about the building, and convinced local businesses that she was acting on my behalf. She'd even convinced her own husband that I'd given her permission to spend my money and make decisions about my property. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Hope you're settling in. I have some exciting ideas for Phase 2 of the renovation. Can we talk later today? P.S. Phase 2. I screenshot the message and sent it to Marcus along with a brief explanation of everything I'd discovered since yesterday. His response was immediate. Holy shit, Delilah. She's planning to expand operations. You need to shut this down before she starts messing with your other tenants' apartments. But before I could shut anything down, I needed to understand exactly what Rebecca thought she was doing. I needed to know what her endgame was and how far she was planning to take this fantasy of being my business partner. I called her back, but this time I was going to let her talk. I was going to listen to her plans and find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. Delilah, I was hoping you'd call. I know the apartment was a big surprise, but I hope you've had time to appreciate all the work I put into it. Tell me about Phase 2, I said simply. Oh, you saw my text. I'm so excited to share my ideas with you. I've been thinking about the building as a whole, and there's so much potential we're not maximizing. The elderly lady downstairs could really benefit from some updates to make her apartment more accessible and beautiful. And the young couple in 2B mentioned that their kitchen is pretty outdated. Rebecca, you talked to my tenants about redecorating their apartments? Well, not officially. I just got to know them a little while I was working on your place.
They're lovely people, and I think they'd be thrilled to have professional design services. I've been researching what other landlords in the area charge for premium units, and Delilah, we could probably increase the rent significantly if we upgraded the apartments properly. We. She was using the word we like we were business partners. And I've been thinking, Rebecca continued, her voice gaining enthusiasm, this could be the start of something really big for both of us. You have real estate knowledge, and I have the design skills. We could expand to other buildings, offer full-service property management with style consulting. I've already started putting together a business plan. My sister had spent my money, invaded my property, and was now planning to restructure my entire business model around her interior design fantasies. And she was about to learn that the person she'd been treating as a junior partner in this venture was actually the sole owner of everything she'd been planning to change. Rebecca, I said carefully, before we talk about expanding to other buildings, I think we need to discuss something important about this building specifically. Oh, of course. I know you're probably worried about the investment, but Delilah, I've run the numbers. With the improvements I'm planning, you could easily justify raising rents by 30 to 40%. This building could be generating twice what you're currently collecting. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. What do you know about my current rental income from this building? Well, I don't know the exact numbers, but I've been doing research on comparable properties in Lincoln Park. Based on the square footage and location, I estimate you're probably collecting around $1,800 per unit, maybe $2,000 for your apartment since it's larger. That's pretty standard for this area. Rebecca had been calculating rental income for my building. She'd researched comparable properties and was making assumptions about my finances based on market analysis. This wasn't casual curiosity. This was business planning. And where exactly do you think I fit into this building, Rebecca? What do you mean? I mean, what's my relationship to this property? Am I a tenant or something else? There was a pause. You're a tenant, obviously. You rent the top floor apartment. Although, from what I could tell going through your papers. You went through my papers? Just the ones on your desk. I needed to understand the building better for the renovation planning. Anyway, from what I could see, you must have some kind of special arrangement with the landlord. Maybe you're the building manager or something? Your rent seems really low compared to market rates. My rent seemed low because I didn't pay rent. I paid a mortgage on a building I owned. But Rebecca had constructed an explanation that made sense to her. I must be getting some kind of deal in exchange for managing the property. Rebecca, who do you think owns this building? I don't know. Some investment company, probably. Most of these old brownstones are owned by property management firms or real estate investors. Why? This was the moment. After 3 days of chaos, unauthorized renovations, displaced tenants, and escalating financial damage, I was finally going to tell my sister the truth about what she'd done. Rebecca, I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting. Delilah, you're being weird. What's going on? I own this building. I'm not a tenant, I'm not a manager, and I don't have a special arrangement with anyone. I bought this brownstone 2 years ago. I live in apartment 4A because I own apartment 4A, and apartments 1A, 2B, and 3C, and the basement, the roof, the lobby, and every inch of the building you've been walking around making plans for. Silence. What? Rebecca's voice was small and confused. I'm the landlord, Rebecca. When you changed the locks on the building, you changed the locks on my building. When you told Mike at Hendricks Hardware that the owner wanted upgraded security, you were talking about me. When you researched property management companies and calculated rental income, you were researching my business and calculating my income. That's not... You can't. Delilah, that's impossible. Why is it impossible? Because you live in an apartment. You have roommate drama and complain about your upstairs neighbors being loud, and you're always worried about money. I realized that Rebecca had been operating on information that was years out of date. The last time I'd lived in a rental property was before I bought the building, but I'd never specifically told my family about the purchase. They knew I'd moved to a new address in Chicago, but I'd never explained that I'd moved because I'd bought the building, not because I'd found a better rental. Rebecca, I haven't had upstairs neighbors in 2 years. I live on the top floor of a building I own. When I complain about money, it's because I have a mortgage and 3 rental units to maintain, not because I'm struggling to pay rent.
But you gave me a key. You said it was for emergencies. I gave you a key to my apartment for emergencies. I didn't give you permission to redecorate, and I certainly didn't give you permission to make changes to the common areas or research my tenants. I could hear Rebecca breathing heavily on the other end of the phone. Delilah, if this is true, then that means you've spent $22,000 renovating your landlord's apartment without permission. It means you've been presenting yourself as my agent to local businesses and my tenants while having no authority to do so. It means you've been planning to expand unauthorized renovations to other units in a building that belongs to me. Oh, God. Oh, God, Delilah, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, Rebecca sounded genuinely distressed rather than defensive or excited. But Rebecca, here's what I don't understand. Even if you thought I was just a tenant, what gave you the right to spend thousands of dollars of my money and completely change my living space without asking me first? I thought I was helping you. You've been working so hard, and your apartment was so plain, and I just wanted to do something nice for you. By spending money I didn't authorize and making decisions I didn't ask for? I know how it sounds now, but at the time, it felt like I was giving you a gift, like I was taking care of you, the way you've always taken care of me. That phrase stopped me cold. What do you mean, the way I've always taken care of you? Delilah, you've been helping our family financially for years. When Travis was out of work, when the kids needed school supplies, when we couldn't make rent that one month, you've always just fixed things for us without making a big deal about it. I had helped Rebecca and Travis financially over the years, but I'd never thought of it as taking care of them. I'd thought of it as helping family members through tough times. So when I saw your sad little apartment with its boring furniture and basic everything, I thought this was my chance to finally do something nice for you, to show you that I could take care of you for once. Rebecca, giving someone a gift doesn't involve spending their money. I know that now, but I was gonna pay you back. I had this whole plan worked out. I was going to start the interior design business, use your building as my portfolio, and pay you back from my first clients. You were going to pay me back by using my building as advertising for a business I didn't agree to support? It sounds terrible when you say it like that. It sounds terrible because it is terrible, Rebecca. You can't just decide to start a business using someone else's property and money without asking them first. I heard Rebecca start to cry, which was not a sound I was prepared for. In all the years of our complicated sisterly relationship, I'd seen Rebecca angry, defensive, manipulative, and excited, but I'd rarely seen her genuinely remorseful. Delilah, what have I done? If you own the building, then I've been committing crimes, haven't I? Identity theft and fraud and, oh God, what if you have me arrested? The thought hadn't seriously occurred to me until that moment, but Rebecca was right. What she'd done wasn't just a family disagreement. It was potentially criminal. She'd used my credit cards without authorization, presented herself as my agent to conduct business, and made unauthorized modifications to my property. I don't want to have you arrested, Rebecca. I want to understand how this happened and figure out how to fix it. How do you fix $22,000? How do you fix changing locks and lying to people? And Delilah, I even talked to your tenants about their personal business because I thought I was helping you manage the building better. What did you tell them? I asked Mrs. Patterson about her lease terms because I thought maybe you didn't know she was paying below market rent. I mentioned to the couple in 2B that their kitchen could use updating.
I talked to Mike at the hardware store about long-term security plans for the building. Rebecca had been conducting business on my behalf for weeks, making statements and gathering information that could have legal and financial implications I was only beginning to understand. Rebecca, I need you to come to Chicago today. We need to sit down and go through every single thing you did, every person you talked to, and every commitment you made. Because right now, I don't even know the full scope of what I'm dealing with. I can't afford to come to Chicago right now. Travis had to take time off work this week because of the kids, and with all the money I spent on your apartment. Rebecca, you'll find a way to get here. Or I'll have Marcus start the legal process to recover my money and pursue charges for fraud. Your choice. It was the first time I'd threatened my sister with real consequences, and the words felt strange coming out of my mouth. But I was beginning to realize that treating this like a family disagreement wasn't going to solve the very real legal and financial problems Rebecca had created. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll drive down this afternoon. Delilah, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." After we hung up, I sat in my transformed apartment and tried to prepare for a conversation that would determine whether my relationship with my sister could survive what she'd done to my life and my business. While I waited for Rebecca to make the drive from Rockford, I decided to do something I probably should have done immediately: inspect every inch of my building to see what other surprises my sister might have left behind. I started with the basement, where I'd stored the unwanted hutch, and worked my way up. The basement revealed the first shock. Rebecca had apparently used it as her staging area for the renovation. Stacked in corners were boxes of additional decorative items, paint samples taped to the walls in different sections, and what looked like architectural sketches of the building layout. She'd drawn detailed floor plans showing how each apartment could be optimized with her design improvements. One sketch showed Mrs. Patterson's apartment with notes like, "Remove wall between kitchen and living room," and "Install luxury vinyl flooring throughout." Another showed the young couple's apartment with "Gut kitchen, install quartz countertops and stainless appliances," written across the top. Rebecca hadn't just been fantasizing about expanding her renovation project, she'd been making concrete plans. But it was the folder labeled Lincoln Park Property Investment Analysis that made my blood run cold. Rebecca had researched comparable sales in the neighborhood, calculated potential rental income after renovations, and even looked into refinancing options for the building. She'd prepared a complete business proposal for transforming my modest rental property into a luxury building. According to her calculations, with the renovations she was planning, I could charge $3,200 per unit instead of the $1,800 to $2,000 I currently collected. She'd researched the demographics of tenants willing to pay premium rents and identified target improvements that would justify the increases. There was even a timeline. Phase 1 was my apartment, completed. Phase 2 was Mrs. Patterson's unit, scheduled to begin next week while the elderly woman was visiting her daughter in Milwaukee. Phase 3 was the common areas, new flooring in the lobby, updated mailboxes, and professional landscaping for the small front garden area. Rebecca had been planning to renovate Mrs. Patterson's apartment while she was out of town, without telling her, the same way she'd ambushed me. I took photos of everything and texted Marcus. Emergency. Rebecca was planning to renovate other units without tenant permission. I have documentation. His response was immediate. Jesus Christ, Delilah, that's constructive eviction. Highly illegal. Document everything and don't touch anything until I get there. While I waited for both Marcus and Rebecca to arrive, I decided to check with my tenants to see if Rebecca had made any commitments on my behalf that I didn't know about. I started with Carlos and Jenny in 2B. "Oh, Delilah!" Jenny's face lit up when she opened the door. "Your sister mentioned you might be doing some kitchen updates soon. We're so excited. The current appliances are pretty old, and she showed us some gorgeous cabinet designs that would really open up the space." My heart sank. "Jenny, what exactly did Rebecca tell you about kitchen updates?" She said you'd been considering improvements to increase the value of the building and that you wanted to make sure all your tenants were comfortable with the changes before moving forward. She asked about our lease terms and whether we'd be interested in staying long-term if the apartment was upgraded. Did she mention anything about rent increases? Jenny's expression shifted slightly. She did say that improvements would probably mean some adjustment to rent, but that you were a fair landlord and would work with us to make sure the increases were reasonable. She seemed to think you really valued having good tenants.
Rebecca had been setting expectations with my tenants about renovations and rent increases without any authorization from me. She'd made it sound like I was planning these changes and had sent her to gauge their interest. Jenny, I want to be very clear about something. I haven't authorized any renovations to your apartment. My sister was acting without my knowledge or permission. The color drained from Jenny's face. Oh no. Delilah, we were actually kind of excited about the kitchen updates, and we told our friends that we were getting these improvements. Did we misunderstand something? I assured Jenny that there were no immediate changes planned and that I'd keep her informed about anything that might affect their tenancy. But as I walked away from their door, I realized that Rebecca's unauthorized promises had created expectations I now had to manage. Mrs. Patterson's response was even more concerning. "Oh, yes, dear. Your sister was so thoughtful. She explained that you wanted to make my apartment more comfortable for someone my age. She mentioned grab bars in the bathroom and better lighting in the kitchen. She even measured my doorways to see if my walker would fit better with some modifications." Rebecca had presented accessibility improvements as my idea, which wasn't necessarily wrong. I did want Mrs. Patterson to be comfortable and safe, but she'd done it without consulting me and without understanding the legal and financial implications of promising specific improvements to a tenant. She also mentioned that these improvements might mean a small increase in rent, but she assured me that you understood my situation and would work with me. Such a sweet girl, looking out for both of us like that. Mrs. Patterson was on a fixed income. Even a small rent increase could force her to move, which was exactly the kind of displacement that gave landlords a bad reputation. Rebecca had no understanding of the delicate balance required to maintain affordable housing while still covering building maintenance costs. By the time Rebecca's car pulled up outside the building, I had documented a trail of unauthorized commitments, unrealistic expectations, and potential legal liabilities that stretched far beyond the initial apartment renovation. Marcus arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a folder thick with legal documents. "Before we go upstairs," Marcus said, "I need you to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. Based on what you've told me, your sister has potentially committed mail fraud, identity theft, unauthorized use of credit cards, and violation of tenant rights. This isn't just about money anymore." Rebecca looked terrible when she finally made it to my apartment. Her eyes were red from crying, and she seemed to have aged years since I'd seen her a month ago. When she walked into the renovated space, she looked around with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It really is beautiful," she said quietly. "I know you hate it now, but Delilah, I put so much thought into every detail. Every color, every piece of furniture, every light fixture. I imagined you coming home and feeling like you were living in a magazine." "Rebecca, this is Marcus Thompson, my property manager. He's here because what you've done has legal implications that go beyond our family relationship." Rebecca's face crumpled when she saw Marcus's folder of documents. "Are you going to have me arrested?" "That depends," Marcus said, "on how honest you're willing to be about everything you've done and how cooperative you are in fixing the problems you've created." We sat around the ornate dining table Rebecca had installed, and Marcus pulled out a legal pad. "Let's start with the credit cards. How many did you use and where did you get them?" "3 cards," Rebecca admitted. 2 I found in Delilah's desk drawer, and 1 I found in her purse when I was looking for her apartment key." "You went through my purse?" "I needed the key, and I thought the credit cards were there in case I needed to buy anything for the apartment while you were gone." Marcus made notes. "Did you sign Delilah's name on any receipts or contracts?"
Rebecca nodded miserably, probably dozens of times. Everyone wanted signatures for deliveries and service calls. I just signed D. Long like it was no big deal. That's forgery, Marcus said matter-of-factly. What about the lock installation? Did you sign contracts for that work? Yes, but I told them I was acting as Delilah's representative while she was traveling. I thought that made it okay. It doesn't. Did you make any commitments to tenants about future renovations or changes to their lease terms? Rebecca looked at me with panic in her eyes. I might have mentioned some possibilities, but I was just trying to gauge their interest. I wanted to make sure they'd be happy with improvements before we made any investments. We? Marcus raised an eyebrow. You were making business decisions on behalf of a property owner without any legal authority to do so. As the interrogation continued, I watched my sister realize that every decision she'd made with good intentions had created a legal and financial nightmare. She'd forged my signature, committed me to expenses I didn't approve of, made promises to tenants I couldn't keep, and presented herself as my business partner in a venture I'd never agreed to join. But the moment that broke my heart was when Marcus asked about her motivations. Rebecca, help me understand something. Even if you thought Delilah was just a tenant, what made you think you had the right to spend thousands of dollars of her money and completely change her living space? Rebecca looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Because she's always been the successful one, the one with money and education and a career, and I've always been the one who needed help. Just once, I wanted to be the one taking care of her instead of always being taken care of her. So you spent her money to take care of her?
I know how stupid that sounds, but I thought if I could create something beautiful for her, something she could never have imagined or afforded on her own, then maybe for once I'd be the sister who gave instead of the sister who always needed. In that moment, sitting in my transformed apartment, surrounded by evidence of my sister's crimes, I finally understood what had driven Rebecca to this elaborate delusion. It wasn't malice or greed, it was a desperate desire to reverse the power dynamic in our relationship by demonstrating that she could provide something I couldn't provide for myself. Unfortunately, good intentions don't erase fraud, and sisterly love doesn't pay legal bills. Marcus spent the next hour walking Rebecca through the legal realities of what she'd done, and with each explanation, her face grew paler. The forgery charges alone could result in felony convictions. The unauthorized use of credit cards qualified as identity theft. Presenting herself as my authorized agent to conduct business crossed into fraud territory. But here's what I don't understand, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. Rebecca, you're not stupid. You researched property values, calculated rental income, and created detailed renovation plans. How did you think this was going to end? Even if Delilah had loved the surprise, she still would have seen the credit card bills eventually. Rebecca wiped her nose with a tissue. I had a plan for that. I was going to tell her about the charges right before she came home, and then I was going to present her with the business proposal I'd been working on. I thought if she could see the potential return on investment, she'd understand that the initial expense was worth it. You were going to ambush her with $22,000 in debt and then try to sell her on a business plan she'd never asked for? It sounds insane when you put it like that, but Marcus, you should see the numbers. This building could be generating $60,000 to $70,000 more per year with the right improvements. That $22,000 would pay for itself in less than 6 months. I stared at my sister. Even now, sitting in my apartment with a lawyer explaining how she'd committed multiple felonies, she was still trying to sell me on her business vision. Rebecca, those numbers assume I want to displace my current tenants and charge luxury rents. Mrs. Patterson has lived here for 15 years. Jenny and Carlos are good tenants who pay on time and take care of their apartment. Why would I want to force them out so I can make more money? Because that's how real estate investment works. You improve properties, increase their value, and maximize rental income. I thought you'd want to build wealth instead of just breaking even every month.
Marcus and I exchanged glances. Rebecca had fundamentally misunderstood my approach to property ownership. She'd assumed I was treating the building as a pure investment vehicle rather than a home that happened to generate rental income. Rebecca, I don't just break even every month. The building generates enough profit to cover maintenance, property taxes, and my business expenses. I don't need to maximize rental income at the expense of good tenants. But you could be making so much more. Delilah, I researched comparable properties, and you're leaving money on the table. With the right improvements and tenant turnover, this building could be your retirement fund. This was the fundamental disconnect between Rebecca's vision and my reality. She saw an underutilized asset that could be optimized for maximum profit. I saw a home and a business that worked well as they were. Marcus cleared his throat. Let's talk about solutions. Rebecca, the first step is returning or canceling everything that can be returned. We need receipts for every purchase, contact information for every vendor, and a timeline for when work was completed versus when items were delivered. Rebecca pulled a notebook from her purse. Apparently, she'd been meticulous about record keeping. I have everything organized by date and vendor. Most of the furniture came from 3 stores, and I kept all the warranties and return policies. What about custom work that can't be returned? The hutch downstairs, the bathroom retail, and the chandelier installation. Maybe the paint, but some of the walls would need to be repainted again if you wanted to change the colors back. Marcus made notes. Okay, so we're looking at probably $8,000 to $10,000 in non-returnable expenses. Rebecca, how were you planning to pay Delilah back for those costs? I was going to start the interior design business. I had clients lined up, well, potential clients. My neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, wants her living room redone, and my friend Sarah from church needs help with her daughter's bedroom. I realized that Rebecca had been counting on future income from a business that existed only in her imagination. She'd spent my money based on projections of earnings from clients who hadn't actually hired her yet. Rebecca, even if you got those clients, interior design projects don't typically generate thousands of dollars in profit immediately. How are you going to cover your living expenses while building a client base? I thought maybe I could manage this building for you while I got the business started. Like, be your on-site property manager and design consultant. I could live in the basement apartment and handle tenant relations and building maintenance. My building didn't have a basement apartment, just storage space and utility areas. Rebecca had been planning to convert part of my basement into living space for herself without asking me. Rebecca, there is no basement apartment. There could be. I researched the zoning laws, and it's totally legal to convert basement space into a rental unit, as long as it meets certain safety requirements. I found contractors who could do the work for about $15,000. Marcus looked at me with something approaching admiration. She really did her homework. Converting basement space to rentable units is a common way to increase building income. But I don't want to increase building income. I want my basement to stay a basement. Delilah, you're not thinking like a businesswoman. You're thinking like someone who just wants a place to live. But you own real estate. You should be thinking about maximizing its potential. This conversation was surreal. My sister had committed fraud, forgery, and identity theft, but she was still trying to convince me that her business plan made sense. Marcus intervened before I could lose my temper completely. Rebecca, let's focus on damage control. We need to contact every vendor you dealt with, explain the situation, and arrange returns where possible. We also need to address the commitments you made to tenants. What do you mean? You told Mrs. Patterson that Delilah was planning accessibility improvements. You told Jenny and Carlos about kitchen updates. Those conversations created expectations that could have legal implications if not handled properly. Rebecca looked confused, but I was just being friendly. I was getting to know the tenants so I could better understand their needs for future renovation planning. Rebecca, when you present yourself as acting on behalf of the property owner, casual conversations become business communications. If Mrs. Patterson decides to stay in her apartment based on your promises about accessibility improvements, and then those improvements don't happen, she could have grounds for a complaint with the City Housing Authority. That's ridiculous. I was just talking to her like a person. You were just talking to her like a person who was representing her landlord's interests. There's a difference. I watched Rebecca's face as she finally began to understand that her friendly conversations with my tenants had created business obligations she'd never intended. Every interaction she'd had while presenting herself as my representative had potential legal consequences. Okay, Marcus said, here's what we're going to do. Delilah, you need to decide whether you want to pursue this legally or handle it as a family matter. Rebecca, you need to understand that your sister has every right to press charges for what you've done. But I'm her sister. Family relationships don't exempt you from criminal law. If anything, the fact that you had legitimate access to her apartment and personal information makes some of these charges more serious, not less. Rebecca started crying again. Delilah, please don't have me arrested. I know I messed up, but I was trying to help you. I would never deliberately hurt you. Looking at my sister crying in my ridiculously over-decorated apartment, I felt exhausted. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with sadness and a recognition that Rebecca's actions came from a place of love, even if that love had manifested in the most destructive way possible. Rebecca, I don't want to destroy your life over this, but I also can't just pretend it didn't happen. The money has to be repaid, the unauthorized changes have to be addressed, and you have to understand that you can't ever do anything like this again. I understand. I swear I understand now. Just tell me how to fix it. Marcus looked at both of us. There is a way to handle this without involving criminal charges, but it's going to require Rebecca to be completely honest about everything she's done, and it's going to require a formal agreement about repayment and future conduct. What kind of agreement? A civil settlement. Rebecca admits to the unauthorized expenses and agrees to a repayment plan. She also agrees to have no access to this building or contact with the tenants without Delilah's explicit written permission. In exchange, Delilah agrees not to pursue criminal charges. Rebecca nodded eagerly. Yes, I'll sign whatever you want. Just please don't send me to jail. There's one more thing, Marcus said. Rebecca, if you violate any terms of this agreement, if you contact the tenants, if you miss payments, if you set foot in this building without permission, the criminal charges go back on the table automatically. As Rebecca agreed to the terms, I realized that this agreement would fundamentally change our relationship. We were moving from sisters who had boundary issues to parties in a legal contract with enforceable consequences. But given what she'd done to my home, my business, and my peace of mind, maybe that was exactly what our relationship needed. The civil settlement took 3 weeks to finalize. Marcus drew up a comprehensive agreement that covered every aspect of the damage Rebecca had caused, from the obvious financial costs to the more subtle issues like tenant relations and building security. Rebecca would pay me back $347 per month for 5 years, essentially adding a second mortgage payment to her family's already tight budget. During those 3 weeks, I had to live with the consequences of Rebecca's gift while we sorted out what could be returned and what couldn't. The crystal chandelier stayed because removing it would require rewiring the ceiling back to its original configuration. The bathroom retiling was permanent unless I wanted to spend another few thousand undoing it. The Persian rug, the velvet sofa, and most of the decorative accessories went back to their respective stores, but the return fees ate into the refund amounts. The hardest part was managing my tenants' expectations. I had to sit down with each of them and explain that my sister had been acting without authorization when she discussed potential improvements. Mrs. Patterson took it well. She said she'd figured something was off when Rebecca knew so much about design but seemed confused about basic landlord-tenant relationships. Jenny and Carlos were more disappointed. They'd been genuinely excited about the kitchen updates Rebecca had described, and I could see them mentally adjusting their long-term plans for the apartment. I felt guilty about their disappointment, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. It's not your fault, Delilah, Jenny assured me. But we were kind of hoping we'd found a landlord who was really invested in improving the building. Your sister made it sound like you had big plans for upgrading everything. I am invested in maintaining the building, I said, but I believe in making changes based on actual needs, not just because they might increase property values. After Jenny and Carlos went back to their apartment, I realized that Rebecca's business proposal had forced me to articulate something I'd never really thought about before: what kind of landlord I wanted to be. Did I want to maximize profits, or did I want to provide stable, affordable housing? Rebecca had assumed the answer was obvious, but sitting in my partially returned to normal apartment, I wasn't so sure. The financial impact was significant even after returns and insurance claims. Between non-returnable items, return fees, emergency locksmith costs, and legal expenses, I was out about $12,000. Rebecca's monthly payments would eventually cover most of that, but it would take years, and there was no guarantee she'd be able to maintain the payments if Travis lost his job again or if they had other financial emergencies. But the emotional impact was harder to quantify. Every time I walked into my apartment, I saw evidence of my sister's invasion of my privacy and autonomy. The chandelier that couldn't be removed reminded me daily that Rebecca had made permanent changes to my home without asking. The custom paint colors that were too expensive to change back meant living with her vision of what my space should look like. I found myself avoiding the apartment more than I used to, spending longer hours at client meetings and finding excuses to eat dinner out rather than come home to the constant reminder of what she'd done. The space that had been my sanctuary now felt like a crime scene that had been partially cleaned up but never fully restored. 3 months after the settlement was signed, Rebecca called me for the first time since that confrontational day. "Delilah, I wanted to let you know that I made the first payment. It should be in your account by now." "I got it, thank you." "And I wanted to ask, how are things with the building? Are your tenants doing okay?" I almost hung up. The settlement agreement specifically prohibited Rebecca from having contact with my tenants, and asking about them felt like testing the boundaries of what she was allowed to discuss with me. "Rebecca, why are you asking about my tenants?" "I just want to make sure they're not upset with you because of what I did. I know I created problems with them, and I feel terrible about that." "They're fine. We worked it out." "Good. That's good. I was worried that my mistakes might have damaged your relationship with them." There was something in Rebecca's tone that made me suspicious. She sounded like she was fishing for information rather than just expressing concern. "Rebecca, are you thinking about interior design work again?" "Well, I have been getting some inquiries from people in Rockford. Mrs. Jenkins did hire me to help with her living room, and it went really well. She referred me to 2 of her neighbors." "That's good. I'm glad you're finding legitimate clients." "Actually, that's kind of why I was calling. I've been thinking about what you said about being the kind of landlord who provides stable housing rather than just maximizing profits, and I realized that maybe I was approaching the whole thing wrong." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe the goal shouldn't be to force out good tenants so you can charge higher rents. Maybe the goal should be to make improvements that help the tenants you have stay longer and be happier." I wasn't sure where this was going, but I didn't like the direction. "Rebecca, if this is leading up to another business proposal—" "It's not. I swear it's not. I just think maybe I misunderstood what good property management looks like. Instead of trying to maximize income, maybe it should be about maximizing tenant satisfaction." "Okay, but why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been wondering if maybe Mrs. Patterson really would benefit from those accessibility improvements I mentioned. Not to justify a rent increase, but just because it would make her life easier and safer." And there it was. 3 months after signing an agreement that prohibited her from having any involvement with my building, Rebecca was trying to get back into my business by repositioning herself as an advocate for my tenants' welfare. "Rebecca, we've been over this. You can't be involved with my building or my tenants. That's not negotiable." I know, but I'm not asking to be involved. I'm just saying that if you ever do decide to make improvements for your tenants' benefit rather than for profit, I've learned a lot about accessibility modifications and aging in place design. I could give you some recommendations.
I can find my own contractors if I decide to make improvements. Of course you can. I just thought that since I already researched all of this. I realized that Rebecca was never going to fully accept that her involvement in my business was over. She'd learned to frame her suggestions differently, as tenant advocacy rather than profit maximization, but she was still trying to insert herself into my decision-making process. Rebecca, I need to go. Thank you for making the payment on time. Delilah, wait. I know you're still angry with me, and I understand why, but I hope someday you'll be able to see that even though I went about it completely wrong, I really was trying to help you. I know you were trying to help. That's what makes this so hard. After I hung up, I sat in my chandelier-lit living room and thought about the strange position Rebecca had put us both in. She damaged our relationship by trying to improve my life, and now she was trying to repair the relationship by offering to improve my tenants' lives. In her mind, the problem hadn't been the helping, it had been the method. But I was beginning to understand that the real problem was Rebecca's fundamental inability to respect my autonomy. She couldn't accept that I might not want help, or that I might want to make my own decisions about my life and business, even if her ideas were objectively better. 6 months later, Mrs. Patterson slipped in her bathroom and broke her wrist. While she was recovering, she mentioned that navigating her apartment with limited mobility was more challenging than she'd expected. I found myself remembering Rebecca's research about accessibility modifications and aging-in-place design. I hired a contractor to install grab bars in Mrs. Patterson's bathroom and improve the lighting in her kitchen. The work cost me $800, and I didn't raise her rent. Mrs. Patterson was grateful, and I felt good about making her apartment safer and more comfortable. But I never told Rebecca about the improvements, and I never asked her for recommendations about contractors or design choices. Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the thing someone else suggested, and learning to separate good ideas from the people who force them on you is one of the hardest parts of maintaining your independence. Rebecca continues to make her monthly payments, and we talk briefly when she calls to confirm that the money has been transferred. She's built a small interior design business in Rockford and seems to have learned to work within the boundaries of what her clients actually want, rather than what she thinks they should want. My apartment still has the crystal chandelier and the custom paint colors that are too expensive to change, but I've slowly replaced the furniture that felt like Rebecca's vision with pieces that feel like mine. It's taken almost a year to make the space feel like home again, rather than like someone else's idea of what my home should be. And I've learned something important about the difference between helping and controlling. When someone spends your money to solve problems you didn't know you had, they're not helping you. They're helping themselves feel better about your life. Real help looks like asking what you need and respecting your answer, even if they think you're wrong. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Rebecca had simply asked me if I wanted my apartment redecorated, instead of surprising me with her vision of improvement. The answer would have been no, but at least it would have been my no to give. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.